Hey guys, let's talk about the Earth. The Earth we can refer to as the geosphere. Now the reason we can call it the geosphere is because the Earth is a big ball in the sky, isn't it? Just like the other planets in our solar system. They are spherical, just balls in the sky, spherical. What does geo mean? Geo means Earth. So geosphere is the Earth as a sphere, as a ball. Okay, so we call it the geosphere. Now, the geosphere is made up of various layers. And in the lesson that you watch on Edpuzzle, they're going to compare the Earth to a cake, because a cake is made up of layers most of the time. And so we can think of the Earth as sort of like an analogy, or a cake as analogy to the Earth, in that it's made up of layers. So let's look at those layers. And by the way, we study the Earth's insides, and you may be wondering about this because, as you can imagine, the Earth is a very big place, and the surface to the very center is a long way, thousands of miles, about 4,000 miles. So you may be wondering, how do we get in there to study where the layers are? Well, we don't. Actually, we study it through seismic waves, which are mostly earthquake waves and then large explosions on the Earth's surface as well. And anyway, that's a completely different topic. But anyway, in case you were wondering, how do we study the layers of the Earth? How do we know where they end and et cetera, what they're made up of? We do it through seismic waves. So let's talk about the layers of the Earth. First of all, there's the crust. Just like on a cake, you've got the crust, right? Just like on a pie, I should say, you have the crust. The Earth has a crust. So that's our top layer. The top layer is the crust, and the crust is solid. It's made up of solid rock and loose rock, or loose materials. But as a whole, it is a solid layer, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to survive on it, right? Now, the solid crust is really kind of thin compared to the other layers. It's only 5 miles deep below the oceans. So this black dotted area right here is a representation of the crust. This is the ocean right here, and this is part of the crust, the top layer of the crust. So the crust is only 5 miles deep or thick below the oceans, and about 25 miles thick from the top of the continents to the next layer, which is the mantle. All right, so the temperature varies, okay? The temperature of the crust varies at the top, which is about air temperature. So if it's about 80 degrees out right now, the surface of the Earth in this area right here is about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And as you go to the deeper and deeper, it gets hotter and hotter. And when you get to the base of the crust, you're at about 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, about 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. It's very hot. The second layer is called the mantle. Okay, the mantle here in my illustration is shown with orange dots right here. That's called the mantle. The mantle is the largest or thickest layer of all of the different layers that make up the Earth. It's actually about 1,800 miles in depth. And it's made up of layers within layers. So we're saying that the Earth is made up of 4 basic layers, and that's true. But the mantle in particular is actually divided into sub-layers. And I want you to watch that video on Edpuzzle, because they're going to talk a little bit about what those sub-layers are made up of, okay, and that's important. Also, the mantle can be, it's very interesting, the mantle can be compared in its thickness, and the layers that make up the mantle can be compared to a hard-boiled egg. So again, make sure you're watching that video, because it's really very interesting. The third layer we're going to look at is the outer core, Now, the outer and inner make up the core of the Earth, or the very center part of it. And before we get to the very center, which is the inner, we have the outer core. Okay, this is the outer core. It's also thick. It's not as thick as the mantle, but it is really, really thick. It's made up of superheated rock, and that rock is at about 1600 degrees Fahrenheit at the top. As you go toward the deeper layers of the outer core, you're getting up to close to 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit in heat. That's very hot, okay? So that's the outer core. It's about 1,400 miles thick. It has a liquid layer, and it's mostly iron, okay? It's a liquid layer, it's mostly iron, made up of iron. Actually, because it's made up of iron, we know that that's the reason. This outer core is the reason for the Earth's magnetic field. And that's a different line of study again. All right, so let's go. Oh, by the way, it reaches about 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature, really hot. Now we're down to the very center, or if we compare the layers of the Earth to a hard-boiled egg or to an egg, the very center of it is what? The center of it is the yolk, right? So you could think of the inner core as the very center of the yolk of the Earth. Okay, it's about 780 miles thick, and it's solid again. So we go from solid to liquid to solid. The inner core is a solid, and it's made up of iron and nickel. And it's super, super hot. The deeper you go in the layers of the Earth, the more heat is experienced, the hotter it is. It's about 13,000 degrees Fahrenheit at the very inner core of the Earth. That's really hot, okay? So again, to summarize, the geosphere is the Earth because geo means earth and sphere means round. So geosphere is just another word for Earth. It's made up of 4 basic layers. The top one is the crust. The one below that is the mantle, then the outer core and the inner core. The deeper you go into the cores, the hotter the temperatures, okay? Make sure you watch that video on Edpuzzle. Take some notes so that you're ready for the open notes test on Friday. Okay? Good luck to you guys.